Hi, I'm Clever Ghoul, but you can call me Nikki. Welcome back to the channel. First of all, I want to apologize for being MIA. The last couple months have been a bit hectic. My cat was really sick, and on top of that, I was trying to do this project the entire time, and doing multiple projects with everything else going on, it just wasn't happening for me. So I'm really sorry that I've been so sporadic, but I'm here now, and I'm doing my best to get back to our regular scheduling starting now. So I really appreciate all of your patience and understanding. Also, I'm sorry for my voice. I left it in Vegas a couple of days ago, so I hope you can put up with me. After seeing Beyonce in May, I knew I wanted to one-up myself if I could design-wise, and I wanted to do that by making some light-up chaps. This idea actually came to me randomly about a week after seeing her in LA, and I just knew that I had to find a way to do it. This video is going to go over the process as best as I can, but so much of it just took place up here in my head, so I really hope it makes sense. With that being said, let's get into it. The lengthiest and most consistent part of this process was actually all of the thinking and brainstorming that I did. I had seen a TikTok of a creator who was selling a chaps pattern specifically for this tour and bought it off Etsy immediately, before even knowing what I wanted to do. At first I considered embroidery and or paint and then using LED lights somehow, and I wanted to try and mimic her silhouette from the neon light segment in the concert, but while I was drawing it out, I knew it would be so hard to get it to stay flat and read correctly, and it had a high chance of failure. So I started to think some more about the album and lyrics and Western imagery that would read well, and suddenly I realized that fire going up the legs would be a perfect fit. And I also remembered that fiber optic fabric existed. Then I started sketching, considering how I wanted them to look more than anything else, and then I printed out my pattern and assembled it so I knew how much of the fiber optic fabric I would need. At the same time, I started really researching fiber optic fabric, how it works, how to use it when sewing, how to cut it, the sizing options, the different types and companies, and after hours of studying, I finally landed on using this specific fabric from the brand Lumi Sonata. It took about 2 to 2.5 weeks to arrive. Next, I went and got some black denim fabric, washed it, and then I dealt with several visits to the vet before I could pick this project back up. I began the process of ironing the denim and cutting out the pattern pieces. When it was time to sew, I found the pattern instructions a little confusing. I even reached out to a friend with a degree in fashion design, and she was also unsure, but reminded me that I knew enough to figure it out as I went and to fix it if I needed to. And she was right. I followed the instructions as best I could, starting with sewing the darts on the yoke pieces and then attaching them to the top of the leg pieces. From there, it was time to make the pattern piece for the flames. I measured the leg of the pattern piece several times before figuring out how large I wanted it to be, and also double checking that I had ordered the right amount of fiber optic fabric, as I was so scared of messing anything up. I drew the flames to size on my iPad and then put a 5-inch grid across it so I would be able to draw it out on a piece of paper. I taped together some large thick pieces of paper to match the size of the iPad drawing, and then very carefully measured out the same 5-inch grid onto it in pencil. Once the grid was down, I looked at my iPad and drew on the flames box by box until I had the same full piece copied over. I then traced it in Sharpie, labeled which side was the front for which leg, and cut it out. I then laid out one leg of the chaps, marked the measurements I had made earlier so the flames would lay exactly where I wanted them to, pinned down the paper pattern piece, and very slowly and carefully cut it out, making sure to not cut any excess so as to not cut into the black that surrounds the flame and makes the shape. I repeated on the second leg, mirroring the first side I just did, and then felt like passing out from the stress as I had no more fabric to correct anything if I made a mistake here. Before I get into adding on the fiber optic fabric, I want to give an overview of how it works. Basically, you get this rectangular piece of fabric with fiber optic wires with little end caps on either side. There are 2 sets of wired lights and battery packs, one per side, and each light bulb screws into the fiber optic end caps, and at the end of the lights, a USB-C plugs into the battery pack. This is what makes the fabric light up. Another thing to note about this fabric is that it's white, so that the lights show up, and while I knew it would be white when it arrived, it still felt weird to see it at first, and so I immediately tested out how it looked in the daylight versus the dark. I can change it to be rainbow, have it flash colors, have different solid colors, and it also has an app you can use with it. The tricky part of this fabric is knowing where to cut it. In this chart, you can see what I mean. The blue shows the area that will no longer light up when cut, while the pink shows what will stay lit. Essentially, anything no longer directly attached to the piece with the wires and lights will no longer be able to light up once cut. I knew this ahead of time, which is why I ordered enough fabric to cut it in half to have lights on both sides, with the battery packs up at my hips and the cut line at the bottom of the chaps. Even knowing all this, I was so scared to cut the fabric. So first, I folded the fabric in half so that there were fiber optic cables on either farther end, and so it was doubled up and would be double layered within the pant. Then I pinned that in place, measured out the halfway point, and marked it with a pencil. Then I attached all of the lights, turned them on, and with my thread snips, cut less than 1/4 of an inch into that line on the fabric to see if any of the lights stopped working. And of course, they stayed lit, so I proceeded to cut across the fabric, leaving me with 2 pieces, one for each leg. From there, I pinned down the fiber optic fabric to the wrong side of the denim, base stitched it with red thread, and then flipped it back to the right side, double checked that everything was lining up okay, and then went around the edges with my sewing machine. This took forever because I wanted to go slow and make sure everything was just right. I then removed any pins, cut out the basting stitches, and then with white thread sewed 2 straight hemlines along the bottom of the fiber optic fabric only to really lock it in and prevent fraying. I then repeated this process on the opposite leg. From here, I followed the remaining directions, sewing the front and back of the legs together, adding on the bias tape around the leg openings, attaching the band for the belt, all while making some minor pattern adjustments as I went to help these fit my body a little better. I knew I would need little pockets to hold the battery packs inside the hips, so I took a very old pair of leggings, laid the battery packs out on top of the leg near the openings, marked where they would fit, sewed along that line, and then cut outside of those lines, and I had instant pockets that would securely hold the battery packs. I marked out where I would want the pockets to sit, then I sewed them onto the pants at the top and then added some extra stitches at the bottom corners so it wouldn't be flopping around as I walked or danced. Lastly, I added a little something extra to the hips to hide any weird sewing and the battery packs, and I was done and on my way to Vegas, which means it's time for the reveal. Here they are. I am so proud of myself. I had never really even made pants before and wasn't sure I'd succeed with this project. This wasn't an easy process and I feel like I grew so much through it. I added on some fringe to the hips, and for the concert added on some flame glasses, my bang earrings that I made in a previous video, a Cowboy Carter pin to my hat, and a proud beehive pin next to my Beyonce belt buckle. I've been a Beyonce fan since I was a child, 26 years at this point. I have grown up with her. I am endlessly inspired by her, her music, her creative vision, her artistry, and her work ethic. And so for the end of this tour, the end of this era, I really wanted to push myself out of my comfort zone. Cowboy Carter is a masterpiece, a genre-bending experience. It both is and isn't a country album. It is a Beyonce album, a work of art with layers upon layers of meaning, filled with historical, musical, and cultural references. It is highlighting the Black American experience historically and presently. She is reclaiming what has been stolen from Black Americans, Black artists, calling it out, dragging it into the light, and reminding us what America really is, while simultaneously reflecting on her own life and career and looking into the future at her legacy. That almost feels like too reductive of a summary. There is so much more to it, so much more I could say. Currently, I just am so thankful and overwhelmed with gratitude for getting to experience this show twice, that I was able to witness this level of artistry firsthand. It has been less than 48 hours since I saw her, less than a day since the tour ended, and I already can't wait for how I one-up myself creatively for the next tour. Like I said before, I'll be back to spooky content and our regular schedule in the next one, but this one really meant a lot to me, so if you're still here, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!